All right, Mark Sisson, thank you so much for joining me today. You're in beautiful Miami, Florida, correct?
I am indeed.
Awesome.
And it's my pleasure to be here, Drew. I got to hand it to you, man. Like I said offline, be careful what you sign up for.
It's so true, man. And like I was telling you, this is actually, it's harder than I remember it being, especially mentally and emotionally. And this is kind of what the whole purpose of my second Fit2Fat2Fit journey is, to bring awareness to the viewers out there that are watching this kind of entertaining journey, this entertaining thing I'm doing, is to help them be more aware of how food doesn't just
Yep.
make you gain fat or lose fat. Like if that's all it did, that would actually be great if that's
Yeah.
all it did to you. But me showing people how it's affecting my sleep, it's affecting my glucose levels, it's affecting my hormones, it's affecting my mood throughout the day.
Yep.
It's causing me to cry, during commercials, like I'm getting emotional, and people don't see that correlation. Also,
Yeah.
talking about my sexual health with my doctor, people are like, "Nah, it's not food. I'll just take this pill." So I'm really, really excited to have you on, because next week is my quote unquote dirty paleo week.
Right.
And you being, the expert in the paleo industry, I would love to kind of pick your brain, but let's kind of start from the beginning for people that might not know what paleo is, or understand, how it works. Let's talk a little bit about, a little bit of the science behind it and exactly, what it is.
Sure. Well, I mean, the concept of a paleo diet is pretty easy. It's a diet that replicates as close as we can in modern times the sort of diet that we evolved over millions of years. The paleo diet is based on the concept that for 2 million years, humans evolved as hunter-gatherers. And as such, we ate certain types of foods, meat, fish, fowl, shellfish, newts, toads, amphibians, insects. We foraged for roots and shoots and berries and nuts and fruits and things like that. We did not eat processed foods of any kind. The paleo paradigm completely eliminates the concept of grain. So in that ancestral model, it predates agriculture, which is really only about 10,000 years old. So we didn't start to grow grains and process grains and make breads and cereals and pastas and crackers and cookies and all this other stuff until about 10,000 years ago. So the paleo diet says, all right, how can I eat in a manner that most closely approximate what our ancient ancestors ate, with the understanding that our genes, those little switches, on-off switches that build up proteins within us, expect those kinds of inputs, and they don't expect added sugar, sweetened beverages, processed foods of any kind, industrial seed oils like cottonseed oil, canola oil, corn oil, soybean oil, things like that. And so the list becomes, list of, beef. Today it's beef,
Yeah.
pork, lamb, chicken, turkey, a couple of kinds of fish, 17 vegetables, if you can name 17 vegetables, some starchy tubers. And then it eliminates these industrial seed oils. So the oils that are allowed tend to be avocado oil, the kind of oils that you would be able to get through pressing them or just consuming the fruit in itself. So olive oil, avocado oil, these are oils that come from the fruit of the plant, versus the seed oils, which are basically from grains, corn oil from corn. You have to really adulterate the heck out of it to get that oil. Same with soybean oil, things like that. So that's the list, and it's a great list, and it's an interesting concept. And I started my own brand of paleo called Primal about 15 years ago, the Primal Blueprint, and I've adapted that. But one of the interesting things is there'll be within the paleo primal community, there'll be some discussion about, well, is dairy allowed on a primal or a paleo diet?
Yeah.
Because theoretically we didn't chase around the animals and then milk them, and the wild animals, and milk them until about 10,000 years ago. So the strict paleo people would say dairy is completely off the list. So you want to exclude dairy as well. Some people now are saying within the paleo community, you know what, some raw dairy is probably okay if you're not lactose intolerant. So I don't want to, go too much into the weeds on this, but that's kind of the basis of this diet.
Yeah, and that's great. And that's what I want to, transition into is, in more modern times, where did this concept first come? Was it 15 years ago when you talked about the Primal Blueprint, or was there someone before that kind of...
People have been talking about it for 20 or 25 years. Mel Connor talked about it a long time ago, and then Lauren Cordain really sort of named it the Paleo Diet and wrote a book called The Paleo Diet. And, we have a lot of kudos to him for his recognition that this was, the way we probably should kind of orchestrate our eating, regardless of what type of eating. Well, in other words, you can be a vegetarian and paleo. You can be a carnivore and paleo. You can be a keto and paleo. I mean, you can use paleo as a template for all these different ways of eating. Yeah. But it was really based on this assumption that if your great ancestors couldn't eat it, couldn't access it, or any food like it, it's probably best to stay away from it.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And that's kind of, obviously what I'm doing with this phase of my Fit2Fat2Forty journey is introducing, these diets, but kind of flipping it because almost all diets, when they become popularized, they can become more of a convenient, unhealthy approach to these diets. And so this is where I want to pick your brain about, okay, sure. So over the past, let's say 10 years, as paleo's become super popular, what have you seen it evolve into that maybe you don't really like where you see some of these things going?
I mean, I think you probably talked about it with Dirty Keto before and other diets. The idea that there will be paleo desserts, for instance, I mean, and I have friends who are in the business of making paleo treats, and they're great people. But the notion is kind of based on, well, okay, as long as we use, date sugar or maple syrup, as long as we don't use grains like, wheat flour, but we use almond flour, that we're crafting a dessert type product that fits the broadest definition of paleo. Yeah. But the fact is that, these are, it's still processing almond flour into a flour to get something that is truly processed. It's still deriving maple syrup from boiling thousands of gallons of natural tree sap down to get this. It's, so you're sort of playing fast and loose with the concept of natural. To arrive at, and I don't want to just pick on the paleo desserts, but that's sort of the thing that's always been an issue for me, because the idea of dessert was like completely antithetical and foreign to any ancestral human. Like, okay, we just had our mammoth chop. What's for dessert? And it's like, but what's dessert? Yeah. So these are modern constructs. So I hear people talking about like, paleo smoothies, where you grind up a bunch of fruit, which is natural and which is paleo, and you add some, MCT oil to it or something like that, and make a 1,000-calorie bomb that is theoretically in the broadest interpretation paleo, but is not doing anyone any favors. It's like those are unnecessary calories or excess calories. The body doesn't know what to do with them except to store them as fat, or even worse, to keep them in the bloodstream and raise blood sugar and then cause all sorts of issues like type 2 diabetes. So it's very easy to go off the rails on any of these diets, as you know, when you start to look at the products that are offered in the marketplace. And the marketers saw an opportunity, and God bless them, that's what commerce is about, and that's what free trade is about, and decided to capitalize on that. So it's, what I saw, I have to tell you a little story. I used to have this event called PrimalCon. Yeah. And the original Primal Blueprint was based on, if you eliminate processed the industrial seed oils, if you eliminate the added sugars, the pies, the cakes, the candies, the cookies, the cereals, the breads, the pastas, and all that stuff, there's a lot of vegetables you can eat, right? And so it's not like you're getting rid of carbs, but you're getting rid of these excessive carbs. Yeah. And these are great foods that you can eat. But if you do it right, you automatically reduce the amount of calories you take in, and your body starts to burn its own body fat. It learns how to burn fat. It learns how to, to go back and tap into stored body fat for energy. Hunger, appetite, and cravings tend to dissipate as a result of this, so you're not as hungry all the time. But I had this PrimalCon event, and we would feed people for 3 days, and we would have, I'd have paleo chefs come in and cook a wild boar, and cook, and prepare all the vegetables, and do all of the things that fit my template. But I would watch these people at every meal take a plate and heap it up with food. And I'm like, dude, I used to be the champion eater in college, and I couldn't eat that much.
Yeah.
So it really sort of put this light on in my head about, I have to also talk about the amount of food people eat, because yes, they're choosing to eat good types of food, but they're still not understanding the concept of how the body responds to these good foods, even these wholesome foods. Yeah. So if you eat a lot of calories with the wholesome foods, and then you add on the desserts, and then you add on the paleo smoothies, or the paleo pancakes for breakfast, or the whatever, you can get into trouble. You can start gaining the weight back, and you can develop the high blood pressure and the high blood glucose and all the things that you thought you were eliminating because you read a book on paleo and thought, well, that sounds great, I can do that.
Yeah. And that's that was perfect, because that's what I was going to ask you, pick your brain about. You're used to telling people, okay, here's how to do the paleo diet. Here's a couple guidelines and rules. What I'm asking you is the opposite of that. How would you help me construct a bad week of like, okay, this is what not to do on paleo, and go watch Drew because he's going to do the wrong things on paleo. So, curious to know if you have any other bad tips for me.
I always said in the Primal Blueprint, meat, fish, fowl, eggs, nuts, seeds, vegetables, and a little bit of fruit. Well, paleo, a lot of paleo people say, well, fruit, it's natural, it's paleo. It was available, particularly seasonal fruit, like at the end of a summer, a growing season. Why not eat a lot of fruit? And so I have, paleo people who say, I'm going to do myself a really solid today, and I'm going to have a fruit salad for breakfast. Yeah. And it winds up being, a 70 grams of fructose kind of sugar bomb. And in the strictest sense of the word, it's natural, it's paleo, it's, it's all of that, but it's probably not what, your genes expect of you as a hunter-gatherer. So that would be one thing. Okay. The other idea that, that any amount of fat or protein is fine. Yep. It doesn't, that saturated fat, for some reason, saturated fat is, first of all, it got a bad rap, and then it got a good rap, and now it's gone back and forth. And now there are a lot of people just say fat doesn't matter, so I'm going to eat as much fat as I want. Well, and by the way, I'm going to eat a sweet potato, because sweet potatoes are natural and they're allowed on the paleo diet. Well, if you combine a high fat meal with 150 grams of carbs in a sweet potato, you're probably making one of the biggest mistakes a person can make on paleo, because you're combining fat and sugar. Yep. So, if you parse these diets, if you have a fruitarian diet, which I'm not in favor of at all, but if all you eat is fruit, your body will adjust to that. You may or may not have issues, but some people seem to do okay on a fruit diet. If you're a carnivore and all you eat is meat, there are a lot of people who are like doing extremely well on a carnivore diet, because you've sort of gone down a path and elected to continue this way of eating. Now, if you start to combine fats and carbohydrates in the same meal, now we get to basically an approximation of the standard American diet. I mean, the standard American diet is sugar and fat in the same meal, right? So you can almost approximate a standard American diet with certain types of food and still stay paleo by the letter of the law. So some of it has to do with not just the types of food you eat, but when you eat them or how you combine them with other foods at that same meal. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And this is kind of one of the interesting things I was thinking about was, as I was approaching this phase of my journey, paleo is one of the only diets between keto, paleo, vegan, and vegetarian that it is more so about the quality of the foods that you're eating, the ingredients of it that you're eating, right? There's a lot of dirty keto foods with a lot of processed, chemicals and artificial sweeteners and things that are keto.
But no carbs.
Yes, exactly. So no carbs. So that's why I got my Diet Coke right here. Paleo is one of those things where it's like, it is more so about the food quality. So there's not a lot of junk food. Even the junk food paleo treats are made with more quote unquote healthier ingredients, if you will, right? Versus these cheap sugars that are out there, and all kinds of unhealthy ingredients that I've pretty much been eating for the first month of my journey, which is a lot of processed carbohydrates and fats combined. And so if you're doing pork sausage with eggs and sweet potatoes and then a ton of fruit afterwards, that's probably not the best way to do paleo from what you're saying. And
Correct.
so, but this is one of the things that I'm very interested in, is I will be eating a lot of calories on the paleo diet and more whole food choices. But I really want to show people, just because you're doing that does not mean you're going to lose weight. So just because you're paleo doesn't mean you're going to lose weight. And will it improve my health? We'll see. I do my blood test at the end of the keto week, and then I'll do another blood test at the end of the paleo week to see how some blood markers change. I'm curious to know what you think might happen, not just weight gain wise, but possibly health wise, going from dirty keto to a dirty paleo. Do you foresee maybe some things health wise might improve, but I
don't know what would improve if you're doing any of these diets dirty. You're shortchanging yourself. But I suspect if you're coming off a week of dirty keto and you go dirty paleo and you start having some paleo pancakes and some fruit and some and I say like a sweet potato with a lot of butter on it, combining the carbohydrates and fat, I suspect your triglycerides will go way up.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting.
And that would be one blood marker that I'd look at.
Yeah, no, we are doing that. So just to give you some reference, I don't think I've talked about this to anyone yet. I just got my blood work yesterday. It started at 46 before I started my journey, right? Really good. That's where we wanted to see it. After 1 month of eating, it's just the standard American diet, it's up at 246 now. And so after this keto week, it'll be interesting to see where that goes. And then from paleo, let's see. Because, like, for example, Oreos are vegan. Right? Oreos are technically vegan, right? You can have Oreos.
Technically vegan. Yeah.
So, but there are no like Oreo paleo treats, and if they are, they're made with what, like you said, coconut sugar or date sugar.
Yeah, I mean, coconut sugar, almond flour, cassava, cane juice. I mean, you can name a lot of these things that are basically sugar in a disguised form, or a form of flour that while it certainly doesn't have sort of the lectin or the gluten or the folded protein issues, still has a crap load of carbohydrate in it, which, as we know, all these carbs convert to glucose in your bloodstream. So when you eat a paleo bread or a paleo dessert or a paleo treat or anything like that, make no mistake, there's no difference between that than a bowl of Skittles when it hits your gut and converts to glucose and goes into your bloodstream.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I'll be tracking with my CGM device to show people, throughout the day as I'm eating these paleo foods, what it's doing to my glucose levels, and I'll also be tracking my HRV, my sleep data, and then my ketone levels too.
No, it's interesting about your HRV because one of the things that I suspect will happen as a result of insulin swings, is that really manifests itself in an altered heart rate. So you get periods of time where your heart's pounding very forcefully as a result of insulin and cortisol, or adrenaline at first and then cortisol, and then other periods of time where it'll settle back into a normal pattern. But that was one of the things that I always identified as a high carb runner, was when I increased my carb intake, and if I ate late at night, which is another thing you might try on dirty paleo, is eating later at night if you don't want to sleep.
Which I haven't been sleeping the past month, so might as well continue it.
Is this erratic heart rate that is so erratic that the sort of sound and feeling and pulse in my ears would keep me, like on the pillow, would keep me awake. It was one of the more annoying parts of being an endurance athlete for 20 or 30 years was that noticeable change in heart rhythm when I ate late, or I ate a lot, or both. I ate a lot late.
Yeah, no, what's really interesting data that I've been capturing is, like, since I started my journey eating the standard American diet, the crappy food, my HRV has gone down to like the 40s or 50s when usually it's above 100. So my sleep quality has gone to crap since I started this journey. Mm-hmm. My first night on keto, though, without those big spikes in blood sugar levels and crashes, was my first night in the green on my Whoop app. And that was the first time I'm like, okay, maybe there's something to these blood sugar spikes and crashes, and my blood sugar is dropping low at night, and almost that adrenaline rush it almost wakes me up in a sense, and that's why it's affecting my sleep. And so it's been really interesting data throughout this journey. But one more question for you, Mark, is the quality of food, for example, meat and veggies, is it paleo if it's not grass fed? Does it have to be grass fed to be paleo? Organic fruits and vegetables, is that paleo, or can you buy any cheap stuff?
That's a great question. So the strict paleo people would say, look, when you're going to eat an animal, you're going to eat the animal that ate its native diet,
okay,
to access the best benefits of a paleo diet. So if you're going to eat a cow's native diet is grass. So if a cow is fed grain, that's not following back the chain of custody and the raw material chain going back to the source. So you might suggest that not eating the grass-fed beef would be a compromise, and for a lot of people that's true. But when I look at this, the first thing I look at is everything exists on the spectrum. So you can have grass-fed, grass-finished, never had antibiotics and hormones. That's beautiful. That's a great cut of meat. For as you go down the spectrum, well, the other end of the spectrum, you have grain-fed, grain-finished, hormones, antibiotics, and the whole gamut. You don't want that. But somewhere in between, you might find something that fits your budget. You might find some of the ranches that they mostly eat grass during the life of the cow, but then they finish them the last couple of weeks with grain, but they never give them hormone or antibiotics. And so I have no problem with that sort of meat source, for example. Because really, when you the protein is the protein, right? The protein, the amino acid profile of all beef is the same. Really, what we're talking about is the fatty acid profile and how much omega-3s and omega-6 you would get different from the grass-fed versus the grain-fed beef. And by the way, at the end of the day, it's not a big difference anyway. You don't eat a grass-fed cow for its omega-3 fats, right? You're going to eat fish for that. The amount we're talking about is so infinitesimally small. It's a blip on the radar and doesn't make a difference.
Yeah.
So you can buy on that spectrum depending on your budget. You can buy the best grass-fed beef you can get, or you can find somewhere in between where it was grass-fed but grain-finished and did not have hormones and antibiotics, and still be pretty close and save yourself at least 50% of the cost.
Yep.
And the same goes for fish. I mean, if you're gonna, you can farm some of the farm salmon is horrible, right? And it's clearly horrible. And then some of the Atlantic, wild caught salmon is fantastic, but it costs 3 times as much. So
yeah, I'm sure you could go down a rabbit hole with all the intricacies of all right, does this fit into what my ancestors would have done? And probably too much work for most people. But I'm curious to know. I'll also be comparing grocery bills, keto versus paleo. This might be one of the more expensive ones if I do go off of more food quality. So I can't just, maybe Walmart. I don't know if Walmart will have all this stuff that we're talking about, but
they will.
Okay. Cool. I will definitely be checking that out.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. I think to not completely bias your dirty paleo week. Do the best you can, buying the best possible products, and just understand that the amounts that you eat and when you eat them, and how you combine them, will make it dirty. That's what will make it dirty more than just buying crappy ingredients and just saying, well, that's why it didn't work because I bought crappy ingredients. No, you could buy good ingredients and still have a dirty paleo diet.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, wish me luck, Mark. This is going to be a very interesting week. We'll see. The food is on Paleo Week will be really interesting. But everywhere I go, Costco, Walmart, you can find these paleo treats literally almost everywhere. As long as it says the word paleo or paleo friendly on there, there's so many more. Which, I'm not and this is what I got in trouble for last week. I got to put the context out there. I'm not saying all these things are bad. You should never eat these things, but maybe every once in a while, it's okay to have these things that fit into that diet category. But when people are eating 2-3 of those per day and, they're saying, hey, I'm keto, I had 3 keto cookies today, and you're over consuming these foods, that's where you can get into some trouble. And that's where just people need to be more aware of all right, if you are going to do these diets, here's going to be.
Well, if you're going to do the diet, do it right, because otherwise there's no reason to do the diet. You may as well just stick to your standard American diet and your, ho-hos, ding-dongs, knee-highs, Cokes, and whatever,
Yep, exactly.
Desserts,
so make sure everyone that's listening, make sure you guys stay tuned, because come January/February, we'll be revisiting you, Mark, and picking your brain on how to do this the right way. I'm really excited about that. that section, because to be honest with you, like I said, this is way harder than I thought it was going to be, way harder than I remember it being. And
And
like you
when
said,
you say harder, Drew, you're talking about it's more uncomfortable.
it's uncomfortable, but the mental emotional aspect of it, because
Yeah.
like we just talked about, the blood sugar spikes with the lack of sleep and the low quality sleep that I'm
That
having
messes your
carries
day up.
over.
Yeah. Yeah.
It messes my day up. My patience with my daughters is worn thin. By the end of the day, I'm not the same person. Like I said, hormones are changing. I can only imagine where my testosterone levels are now. I'll get those checked soon. And this is what I want to make people more aware of, is like food
Right.
affects you way more than you think. And so I really appreciate you coming on, Mark, and everything you do, and all your wisdom. So thank you so much for sharing that. And you've helped me out in so many other ways too, with endurance training and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I appreciate your help.
It's my pleasure, Drew. Good luck.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.